Welcome to Success in Motion. Join us as we dive deep with top leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals, uncovering strategies to grow, scale, and succeed.
Hello, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of Success in Motion. Here I am with Alrick Drummond. She is a pediatrician. She's been practicing medicine since 2018. Before that, she studied medicine in the University of Florida State, and she has been a lifelong resident of Florida, except for a short stint where she did her residency. She currently works at Children's Healthcare, and now I'm going to give her a couple of moments to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I just say that my name is Alrick Drummond. I am born and raised in Tampa, Florida. I did complete my undergraduate and med school degrees at the Florida State University. After which I completed my training in pediatrics at Chester Healthcare in Chester, PA, which is right outside of Philadelphia. And I missed home, so I decided to come back home and work as a pediatrician in the area. And now I actually am working at Children's Health Center, which is actually the practice that my actual pediatrician is working at. So I'm working with the person who inspired me to be a pediatrician. So kind of a full circle moment with my career. So yeah.
It's pretty cool that you're able to work with the person who inspired you to join the medical field. What has that experience been like for you?
It's been different in the sense that, when you work with someone, there's a different relationship. And not only that, but the way you see that person changes, because as a, growing up seeing her, she was kind of like that, pinnacle, or like, the example, or like, who I wanted to be, what I wanted to become. And then, obviously you have different experiences through training and stuff like that. So it's just a different relationship, I think. I definitely still have a lot of respect for her, but the respect that I have for her, has changed in the sense that I'm seeing her in a different light, working as a physician side by side, as opposed to having the same, doctor-patient relationship.
Awesome. So there's a lot of competition in the pediatrician space in general. What does Children's Healthcare provide that sets you guys apart from everybody else?
Oh, so yeah. So Children's Health Center has been in the community of Tampa for over 20 years. Over 20 years. Dr. Yaku started working somewhere else, and then she opened a practice. And so I think one of the things that makes it special is that it's taking care of multiple generations of families in the Tampa community, Tampa area. And so you have that connection of, my mom or the patient's mom went there, then, now they're taking their children here. And so that is really important. And the other thing that makes it different is that, both myself and Dr. Yaku are both Black women, and there aren't very many practices that have two, Black female doctors at the primary, but, physicians that provide care. So, we provide care for everybody, regardless of, race, color, sex, or anything of that nature. But, a lot of times we know in healthcare, there is a disparity in terms of, who gets what care, or, just, having a doctor that, can relate to a patient's experiences and issues. It makes a difference. And I do think people seek this practice out because of that reason.
I think it's pretty cool that the two of you ladies have been able to join together as Black women to create this office and to help it grow. Typically, when you think of a doctor, you're thinking of a white man, and white men. I am one. No offense, right? But we get our mindset in a certain way, and being able to bring the intuition of a woman into a pediatrician's office, and not only a woman, but a Black woman who can contribute more to that clientele base, connect better. That's pretty awesome. Do you see
Mhm.
that that really does set you apart in that industry?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Um, there's been a lot of things happening in the country over the last several years in terms of, just the obviously political climate, as well as there's always been that disparity amongst people of color in terms of the care they get from individuals that may not look like them. And I do find that one of the most common things that I hear from patients is that they appreciate being heard. And a lot of times patients, don't feel like they're being heard. And so when I approach, a new patient or a patient who has an issue, like I try to make sure I don't dismiss their complaints, because a lot of times people do feel dismissed by
Yeah,
other doctors. And I try to, understand their point of view, how this, issue is affecting them or their child. And then I work from there. I'm always very, honest about, what my limitations are, which I think is important. I would never say that, oh, this is nothing, or, just because I don't know about it. Right. I'm very much a person that will, look for the answer or try to find somebody who has the answer, or
great attitude.
or try to at least put in my due diligence. Right. I'm not saying I'm going to always know what happened to the child, what's wrong with the child, or what have you, but I do feel like it goes a long way when a patient or family feels like you're working with them and you're coming up with a plan to evaluate this issue with them as opposed to for them, right? Because people do have access to a lot of different information, and they may have looked up certain things, and I want them to feel comfortable coming to me and say, "Hey, Dr. Drummond, I saw this and this. What do you think about that?" And if I don't know anything about it, I'm going to say I have not heard about it, right? But I always still try to have an open dialogue about what patients' concerns are and questions are.
That's a fantastic attitude that you have. Like, we don't know everything, right? But we do have information at our fingertips. And with your skills, your background in medicine, that gives you a leg up to be able to go and find the answers that you're looking for. And if
Mhm.
you have that attitude that you might not know the answers, but you can find them, it's
Right.
definitely going to put you in the right mind space to be able to
Hmm.
help the most amount of people. So
Yeah.
if you were looking at someone who is just getting out of high school and they want to get into the medical field, they want to become a pediatrician such as yourself, what would be the one thing that you would suggest where they start, or the key element that will help them succeed in what you do?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing is to find out what your resources that you have available are. I know for me personally, I've always wanted to be a physician, so I was very proactive about the things that I did. For instance, I did, attend a high school, Tampa Bay Tech high school, that had a health professions academy. Even though it wasn't physician focused, it was in the medical field. So I always knew that I wanted to be doing something in the medical field to familiarize myself with the environment, right? So I think that's important. I think what's also important is making sure that this is what you want to do, because it does take so much of a time commitment, from an an early age, if that's something you want to do. But don't be like, too, blindsided, like, or not blindsided, but like don't don't always be open to other things, right? And make sure that this is what you want, right? Not because someone told you should do it, or not because you think this is what your parents want you to do, but do it because it's what you want to do. And explore other things to make sure those things aren't something else that you might consider, because you know a lot of people can go through this whole labyrinth of doing medicine, getting your undergrad, going through these years of school and training, and finish and realize like, wait, is this even what I want to do? Or this is not what I expected. And then they kind of find themselves in that place where, they're trying to like, reinvent themselves and everything. But I think, there has to be a balance because obviously when you become a physician, you do have to meet certain, certain milestones and you have to get certain grades and things of that nature, so you don't necessarily have the same ability to just brush off different classes and stuff, so you want to take it seriously essentially, so you want to make sure this is what you want to do, and when you make that decision you want to put your best foot forward and also try to make sure you understand not just the role of a physician, but everybody around that physician, like how everyone works to make, healthcare work. Because it's truly a team and no one does this, without help. So
Yeah.
being open to help, being open to criticism, being open to, understanding other people's roles is extremely important. And that's, I think, one of the most important things that, I would say to make sure you understand not just what it means to be a physician, but what it means to work in healthcare, and also understand what it takes to make it to that point of being a physician.
Yeah, I really like what you said there. So, sometimes we get super focused on a specific end goal and we don't look at all of the other options. So I like how you started out just saying, hey, get your toes wet, go and explore what the options are. You don't have to pick day one what you're going to do, but you need to go and experience what the medical world has to offer. And then once you've gotten in there and you see a little bit, that now you can start to specialize more towards a specific industry. But then also, I like there towards the end where you were talking about all of the other people who you work with. There's a lot of people within your office that aren't physicians. You have the nurses, you have the front office staff, you have the billing people that you have to work with, you have the insurance agencies that you have to work with, and I'm sure I'm forgetting dozens of people who you work with on a daily basis
Right.
that you have to be able to work with and understand where they're coming from to be successful.
Right. Yes, 100%. And one of the things that I also did, it was actually in between me finishing undergrad and starting medical school. As I mentioned, I went to Tampa Bay Tech and I actually received my training to become a CNA. And so I actually worked in a nursing home for about a year while I was applying for medical school and things like that. So, I mean, that was definitely a very different experience in the sense that it was medical, related to the medical field. But as a pediatrician, people would think, okay, well, what is, working in a nursing home have to do with anything? And for me, it had a lot to do with it. And, obviously looking back, because, when you're working with children, there's usually an adult attached to that child, right? So you have
Yes.
to understand how to work with people, right? And not only that, but there's usually that, dependent, relationship, which that's, you see a lot in the nursing home, right? So if a person's in a nursing
Yeah.
home, they usually have like a family member who is a caregiver, or like, not a parent per se, but, a child or, relative that manages their care. And so they're going to have questions about, okay, what are you giving, grandma Susie, how's she been doing, stuff like that. So that's part of the process of learning how to work with people and also understanding what other people do, because again, as a physician, I don't have to do the same thing a CNA does, on a regular basis, but I respect what they do because I did it, right? And
Yeah.
so there's something to be said about being in that position and doing what they did. And so when you're in a position where you are, depending on them, and let's say you're short staffed or something like that, I don't have a problem with jumping in and doing blood pressures and checking weights and stuff like that, because it's something I did. I don't think of that as something I can't do just because I'm in a different position. I don't have to do it, right? But it's important for me to make sure my team knows that I'm a team player and that I'll step in when need be. I'm not oh well, you gotta do that or you gotta do this, and I'll just wait for you to be done. If I know there's something I can do to help, make the office run more smoothly, which if it means me stepping out of, my typical role, I'll do that.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you have a lot of experience. You've been doing this for a while now. You graduated in 2018, and you've been doing medical since before that, because you were going to school, you did your residency and all of that. So I have two questions for you, which is really the same question, just in two time periods, right? What was your biggest challenge getting started? And then what do you see your biggest challenge today after being in this field for so many years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So getting started, I think I was always a good student, right? Because again, I knew that I wanted to go to school, go to college. So I kind of always, did my best. Like I was never really a slacker, and I was always pretty self-motivated. Neither one of my parents went to college, and, I kind of, blazed the path in the sense. I actually have a twin sister, and she does accounting, but we were both going into college at the same time, not really having a point of reference really of what that meant. So, just doing something that other people in your immediate orbit didn't do is obviously a challenge. And then I think, once I did medical school, or excuse me, as I did undergrad, I had to take my tests, for MCAT and things like that to get into medical school. I didn't necessarily perform the way I wanted to perform on that test. So that was a bit of a hurdle in terms of getting into medical school. But one thing that I did do is I was, again, very active during undergrad with the pre-med organizations and things like that. And they had connections to the medical school. And as a result of that, I was able to, get into what's called a bridge program at the Florida State College of Medicine. And it's a program to help transition, people who were like me, who never really had physician, they didn't have that physician family, or they were even maybe first generation college students like myself. And so that program helped us transition to, going into medical school. We did basically a master's program for a year, where we actually took some classes with like the medical students that came in that year, and we also took classes separately. And as long as we completed the requirements for the bridge program, we matriculated into that incoming class of next incoming class of medical students. And so I think that was, those initial, I think, challenges for me. But, it takes a village truly. And I think that's really what helped me, kind of overcome those things. I think currently, I think the biggest challenge is, you know, I think the what next is a challenge for me, in the sense that, as I mentioned, this is kind of what I wanted, right? I worked so hard to get to this place. And now for me, it's kind of like, I love my patients, I love seeing patients and things like that. But is that also that feeling of, is there something more that, I can be doing, with my abilities, with my talent, with my knowledge, and how to, be able to reach people outside of the office, because that's something I do want to do. But it is challenging because, I see a full day of patients, and then you have to do all this administrative work, like with the, completing notes and stuff like that, doing a lot of paperwork. So it's like you're tired, and it can be difficult to motivate yourself to, you know, get past that, and try to find what other purpose you may have, or I may have, I should say.
Yeah, you just unpacked a lot of information there. And thank you for sharing that story, because often we think that there's only one path to get us to where we want to be. You have to follow every step, but you've proven that you got to the same destination, but you had to take a side step to get there, and you didn't give up. And really, what it is that causes people to be successful is they're willing to do what it takes to get to their goal, right? Even if it's not a straight line. Sometimes there's setbacks. Sometimes there are side steps. Sometimes you have to go through a different program to get to where you are, or you have to go pick up another skill to be able to get to that next level. And I think that's pretty cool that you were able to navigate that, given the fact that you are a generation college graduate. Not only are you a first generation college graduate, but you pushed it to become a doctor. That is fantastic. So congratulations to you for being willing to push through that, even going through a somewhat unconventional path to get there.
Yeah.
And then that question that you had, the challenge of what's next in today, that's what everybody's struggling with, right? And so, how do you attack that challenge of what's next and how to overcome the uncertainty to be able to push you forward to figure it out what's next?
Well, in all honesty, that is still something I'm working through. You know, when you guys contacted me about this podcast, I felt like it was an opportunity to kind of start, get my feet wet and kind of see like is this something that I can do, or like that I can a way I can get my voice out. I've also looked at things kind of like related to my field in terms of I see a lot of children on the autism spectrum. And so that's something I've, gotten more interested in is looking into like ways I can, provide more resources for those families, and things like that. Um, so yeah, I'm still kind of like, you know, sampling different things, kind of seeing, and I'm kind of just kind of trying to see what sticks. And so that's why I wanted to, like I said, talk to you today, because I thought you know what, I've been saying I want to do something different, so I thought this might be a good opportunity. And I came in to this not really having any expectations or anything like that, but I just want to do this experience to see what it's like. And I'm glad I did, because it's kind of like opening up some you know thought not thought process, but it's just kind of opening some doors, I feel like, in terms of how I can share my story with others, how my
Yeah,
story can be an inspiration to others.
perfect. So let's shift gears here just a little bit, right? You're in the healthcare facility. There's a big push in social media talking about personal care, right? Taking care of me so that I can
Hmm.
take care of others.
Hmm.
How do you um, deal with juggling work-life balance and then also trying to figure out what's next and then home life, all of that?
Hmm.
How do you make all that fit in a 24-hour day?
Well, again, that's an evolving process. I think it definitely has a lot to do with boundaries. And when you're working in healthcare, there's always something you could be doing, right? There's always that note that just you need to finish, or this lab that you have to follow up with, this patient you need to call back. But also, you have to separate yourself from being a doctor and being a person, right? So there's always going to be something I could be doing, and I have to understand that I am no good to my patients if I am not taking care of myself, right? And so for me, again, I'm still learning this. Like, I'm learning how to be okay with not getting everything done, but still appreciating the accomplishment that I have done. Like, let's say, I'm really tired one day, but I know I have to finish these notes, from the earlier in the day, and maybe I'm like super tired, but I like kind of like bargain with myself. I'm like, okay, you can do this for X amount of time, but then get up, make yourself get up and do at least 10 notes. So I try to set like benchmarks in both my personal life and my professional life, and you know, um, making sure that, like, I say, okay, I may need to, or feel like I need to do X, Y, Z, but I also haven't worked out in several days, so I'm going to do this and give myself a break and do this, right?
Yeah.
So I think, that's what I've been trying to do to help take care of myself. And obviously it's not a perfect, system, but it's something I'm learning to find out what works best for me.
Yeah, I personally, in my life, I find that you have time for what you make time for, right? And so it's all about setting priorities. You have to go through your day. There's a lot of things that we can do
Mm,
in our work life or in our personal life that's just busy work, right? It doesn't really matter if it happens or not,
mm,
or if it happens that you make it happen or if you get somebody
right,
else to do it. And so it's
right.
really about finding those most impactful nuggets. What do you have to do today to say that today is a successful day? Go get
I
those
agree.
things done.
Mm-hmm,
For me, going to the gym makes it a successful day. If I don't, then I sit in an office chair all day, right? And
right.
so I end up after a couple of days, my body just hurts. And so I need to get out and move. And so if I
Mm-hmm,
don't make a conscious effort of going to the gym, then I don't. And then I
mm-hmm,
suffer. I pay the consequences. So just
right.
identifying what is needed in your day to make it a successful day, and then making a conscious effort of accomplishing those things, and then
Mm-hmm.
letting the busy work fill in the gaps around those key elements. Um, well, it sounds like you things are going well for you in your business, and a lot of people are looking towards the future. Yourself, you said that you're looking towards the future. There's a big buzzword going around right now about passive income.
Mm-hmm.
So that's more of putting your resources to work rather than having to put your time to work to
Mm-hmm.
generate more revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And they're using that to enhance their income, but also their quality of life and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about this topic?
I I I love the idea of it. I think sometimes that using the word passive income is kind of, a misnomer because I think you have to do something, right? You know what I mean? Like it's not truly. I don't think there's truly a such thing as passive income. I think, you make a decision to make an investment in something, whether it's an investment of time, investment of money, and you see how that investment grows. So I don't care for the term but I know what you mean. I don't care for that term passive because I don't really feel like it's truly passive. It's just not the same type of, like I said, work that you would be used to. Like you're putting in work in a different way. You're putting in resources in a different way. But I love the idea of not having all your eggs in one basket. And I think that's a better way to kind of, discuss that particular topic is not having all your eggs in one basket. Like, if I stop practicing medicine, will I go broke? Right? Or if I stop doing
Yeah.
this, how else will I make money? Right? And I think that's a bigger, the bigger idea behind the whole passive income thing. And I do love that. And that's something I, want to get into. But again, it's one of those things that, I'm still trying to figure out how it would work best for me and how it would fit into my life to do something like that. But obviously, you have like, the 401k stuff, and then I have some little, stock market investment stuff with Stash, those kind of platforms. But um I definitely still have that desire to again not have all my eggs in one basket and to kind of like
Yeah.
diversify where I get my income from.
Yeah, that is a good thing, a good point that you made. Passive investing has been it's been a catchphrase for a while now, and people really use it in the real estate space, thinking, "Oh, go buy a rental house, and that's passive investment because you have your renters who are paying your mortgage." But they forget that, yeah, you still have to. That is a business. You have to run
Mhm,
that business, right? It might
mhm,
be different than your day job, but that's still a business. And so,
mhm,
um, you have to be aware of whatever that passive opportunity is, all of the nuances of it, to be sure that it is something that meshes well with your lifestyle, right?
mhm.
Even if you're going to put your money in something like a 401k or the stock market, you still need to be on a regular basis checking on that to make sure that it's performing the way you expected it to perform. And
Right,
so, is that passive? I mean, there's an active aspect to it, right?
right, right.
Um, So I think, yes, there is an opportunity for passive, but don't get tied up in the word passive
Right.
so much, and just understand it is what it is.
Right.
It's an alternative uh,
Right.
investing strategy to
Yeah.
diversify your income.
Right. I like that term, like more of like as opposed to passive, saying more of like an alternative, because like I said, for me the connotation behind passive is just like I'm just throwing money at something, or I'm just I'm not actively involved in this revenue of making money, which you have to have some kind of activity, right? Because how can you do it if you don't put in some sort of effort, whether it be in a financial way, whether it be, sweat equity, whatever the case may be.
You definitely had to work to generate that money to invest. So at
Correct.
the very least, you have that activity creating that opportunity.
Right.
Awesome. Well, we are reaching the end of our time block here for the podcast. It's been a pleasure having you on, and I do thank you for your time. But before we wrap this up, I'd like to give you the opportunity to give people a way to connect if your story resounds with them and they want to know more about you or learn from you and follow you. How can our audience connect with you?
Well, I have a social media on Facebook. If you search my name, Alrick Drummond, MD. I haven't posted on it in a while. I haven't posted on it in a while, but I think after this, I'll definitely make a bigger effort to do it. But it's my name, ALRICK DRUMMOND, I have a Facebook page. Um, Forgive me, I can't remember my Instagram page, but they are linked to the Facebook. But I think with this opportunity, I will become more active in it. But if you search my name, you should be able to find my Facebook page.
Awesome. Well, I hope that your story affects or inspires at least one person to go and take that path a little less traveled, even if it's something difficult that doesn't work out quite the way you wanted it to. Just don't give up and keep going until you get to where your dreams are. And then once you've accomplished those dreams and you've become this fancy doctor in your fancy office with all of your patients,
Mhm.
don't give up on growth, right? Always look for what's next. How can you be better at what you're doing or add to that to make you a more well-rounded person? Well, that's the end of what we have today. I appreciate you being here with us, and we'll see you guys next time.
All
Thanks.
right, perfect. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning into Success in Motion. Want to share your story? Visit successinmotionpodcast.com/guest to apply and be featured on the show.